Rainbow Magic Flora the Fairy Dress Fairy. Fancy Dress Fairy. Story 1, The Great Cake. What a beautiful palace, Rachel Walker cried when she saw McCurcy Castle. Her grown-up cousin, Lindsay, was having a party there to celebrate her wedding anniversary, and Rachel was invited, along with her best friend, Kirsty Tate. It's just like a fairy tale castle, Rachel said. Kirsty grinned. She and Rachel knew all about fairies because they had met and helped the fairies many times. Inside the castle, Lindsay showed them to their bedroom. Rachel and Kirsty gasped with delight when they saw the huge room. Lindsay pointed to a small door set opposite the beds. That door leads up to the battlements, she said. Be careful if you go there. As Lindsay hurried off, Rachel opened the little door and found a staircase winding upwards. Suddenly, a chilly gust of wind blew right down into the bedroom. Look, there's ice all over the stairs, Kirsty gasped. The girls were curious, so they climbed the steps, holding onto the handrail. The higher they got, the colder they felt. My icicle party will be the best fun ever, snapped the little icy voice ahead of them. The two girls crept on the top of the steps and peeped around the turret. They saw Jack Frost standing there. I'll be the one having a party tomorrow, not these pesky humans, he said to the goblin serpents beside him. We can't let Jack Frost spoil our party, said Kirsty. Let's go to Fairyland and get help. The girls opened their special lockets and sprinkled fairy dust over their heads. The magical dust turned them into fairies and whisked them away. As soon as Rachel and Kirsty landed on the fairyland, the fairy in a fabulous mermaid costume flew up to them. Oh, I'm so glad to see you, she cried. I'm Flora, the fancy dress fairy. The girls said, Hello. Is something wrong? Kirsty asked. Some goblins have stolen my magical items, Flora said. I need them to make sure fancy dress parties go well. The magical figurine, a little golden model of the princess, makes food taste wonderful. The Red Riding Hood cape helps costumes look good, and the third item is a mask with rainbow feathers that makes sure everyone has a fun time. Flora and Kirsty looked at each other in alarm. Flora, we know where your items might be, said Kirsty. I bet Jack Frost's goblin have taken them for his icicle party. Then I'll magic you back to McCursty's castle. McCurcy Castle, and we can all search for them," said Flora. The girls were swept up in a cloud of fairy dust. A moment later, they found themselves standing on top of the castle. Kirsty looked over the stone battlements at a van that was parked below. "Look, goblins!" she said. The cake shop van had its back doors open. As the girls and Flora watched, they saw 3 goblins climbing out. The goblins had a big cardboard box, and they tore it open. Beside it was a big white cake. On top of it was a little figurine. "They're stealing Lindsay's cake," Rachel wailed. "And my magic figurine," said Flora. "Without it, all the food at the party will be spoiled." Flora whizzed down to talk to the cheeky goblins. "Go away, pesky fairies," said one of the goblins. "We're taking this cake for Jack Frost's icicle party." He broke a chunk of cake and threw them at Flora and the girls. "He's ruining it," Kirsty gasped. Then the other two goblins began eating the cake with their hands. "Yum," they say. "Stop that!" the first goblin shouted. "Jack Frost's waiting for us." "We should put the cake in the van," said another goblin. The girls and Flora saw a different van parked nearby. It had Jack Frost's Frosted Delights written on the side. The goblins ran over to it and began struggling to put what was left on the cake inside. Flora, Rachel, and Kirsty wondered how they could stop the goblins getting away. Suddenly, Rachel had an idea. "If we lift up the drawbridge, they won't be able to leave the castle." "Brilliant," said Kirsty. The goblins had climbed into their van and were driving it away. But Flora waved her wand and pointed it at the drawbridge. Magical sparks flew around the chains and the drawbridge lifted up. The girls were trapped inside the castle. "Thanks, Flora," said Rachel. "Let's get the cake." Quickly, Flora turned Rachel and Kirsty back into the human size. But before they could get to the van and rescue the cake, the goblins opened the back door. "All right, have your stupid cake," one sneered. They pushed the cake out. Splat! "Oh no!" cried Rachel. The cake was ruined, but Flora's figurine was still on one piece. "Those silly goblins forgot about the icicle party and just wanted to accept us," said Kirsty. "Don't worry," whispered Flora. "Wait until I get my magic figurine back." Flora lowered the drawbridge. The goblins zoomed out of the castle in their van, blowing raspberries at the girls. As soon as the van was gone, Flora flew over their figurine. "Now close your eyes and make a wish," she said. The girls held hands and wished for the most beautiful cake ever made. When they opened their eyes again, it was standing in front of them. Story 2, Colorful Costumes. The day of the anniversary party has arrived. I'll show you the costumes, Lindsay said to Rachel and Kirsty. You can have the first pick. Kirsty and Rachel followed Lindsay down the staircase and along the corridor to the sturdy wooden door. Enjoy choosing your outfits, she said. I have to go and prepare the party. This will be fun, said Kirsty. She pushed open the door. But the girls were shocked when they saw what was inside. 2 goblins were pulling costumes off racks and throwing them around the room. Stop that! cried Rachel. The room was a total mess. One rack had been knocked over and the costumes were lying in a heap. The goblins saw the girls and grabbed piles of clothes. Then they climbed out of the window ledge. They're going to jump, Kirsty shouted. The goblins leapt out of the window and held into a heavy rope, which had been tied to a wardrobe. The girls rushed to see where they had gone. Look, Kirsty cried. She pointed at a boat on the moat. In it were 3 goblins ready to row it away. They've got Flora's magic cape, Rachel gasped. She spotted a bright red material in the boat. Let's get it into the drawbridge and grab the cape. As the goblins rowed past, Kirsty said. The girls dashed down to the stairs and past a suit of armor with an open visor. They could see a strange, sparkly glow inside. It was Flora. Hello, girls, said the fairy as she flew out of the helmet. Where are you going? Rachel quickly told Flora what had happened, and the 3 friends hurried to the drawbridge. We're going to lean over and grab the cape, Kirsty said. Good plan, Flora replied. Rachel and Kirsty lay down on the drawbridge. The boat with the goblins was closed. Rachel reached out to snatch the sparkling red cape, but one of the goblins spotted them. They're trying to steal our costumes, a big goblin yelled. Stop rolling around in the circle. Let's go to the bank. Kirsty and Rachel and Flora watched as the goblins rode away. I nearly got the cape too, Rachel said. The girls ran across the drawbridge. They were hoping to catch the goblins on the other side. The goblins reached the bank and threw the costumes out of the boat. There are too many to carry, one goblin shouted. Put on some of the clothes, another goblin said. Flora and the girls watched in a surprise as the goblins dressed themselves up. They looked ridiculous. The costumes were too far too big for the goblins. They had been designed for humans. One goblin put the tiger outfit and the clown's nose. Another was wearing a pink wig with a golden crown on top. He also had Flora's magic cape tied around his neck, but the hood kept falling towards over his face. All of them were just wearing odd shoes and kept tripping up. Flora, Rachel, and Kirsty couldn't help laughing as they crossed the drawbridge and reached the bank. "Give us those costumes," Flora called. "No," came a reply. "Jack Frost's holding his party here tonight, so you won't need them for your party." Another goblin cackled in glee. Then they threw a dress over Rachel, Kirsty, and Flora. "Help!" Rachel cried, trying to struggle free. The girls quickly untangled themselves from the dress, but by then the goblins had already run off. They had left lots of costumes behind them on the ground. "But we can't leave them but there are too many to carry," said Rachel. She pointed at the scattered clothes. Kirsty looked closely at the pretty jacket. It was stitching on this coming loose, she cried. "The costumes were falling apart because the magic cape is missing," Flora explained. "If we get it back, I can fix them." "Can you shrink the clothes to pocket size?" Kirsty asked. With a wave of her wand, Flora made the clothes tiny. The girls could slip them into their pockets, and they all rushed after the goblins. They ran towards a steep slope where the goats were grazing. "Perhaps we can ask the goats to help us," Rachel suggested. "Great idea," Flora said. "Animals like fairies." Flora whispered to the goats. They looked up and trotted off the goblins. They were blocking their path. The goblins stared nervously at the hairy creatures. They shook with fear. "They're very big," said one goblin. "Do you think they'll eat goblins?" asked another. One of the goblins was wearing a hat with a felt flower. A curious goat came over to snip it. "Bah!" said the goat, and tried to eat the flower. The goblins were terrified. They threw down all the costumes and was carrying back away in fear. "What goats really want is the clothes," Flora told the girls. "They like to eat cloth." The goats started sniffing the goblins all over. The goblins pulled off their coats and held them out. They wailed in fear. "Don't eat me," begged the goblin with the cape. "The cloak is too taser than I am." The goat snored. Yelling with fear, the goblins threw down the cape and ran away. His terrified friends followed. Quickly, Flora shrank the clothes, and the girls gathered them up. Then they ran back to the castle. Flora began to sort out of the mess in a room where the costumes were kept. As the fairy flicked her wand, Rachel and Kirsty watched the clothes grow back to normal size and tidy themselves up. "I must take my magic cape back to fairyland," said Flora with a smile. "Meanwhile, you two need to get dressed for the party. Somewhere in this room, my magic has sorted out perfect costumes for you." Rachel and Kirsty grinned at each other. Let's see what we can find, Kirsty said. The perfect party. Story 3, The Perfect Party. Look, Rachel, cried Kirsty. She had spotted tiny magical sparks shimmering around the clothes rail. Hanging on the rail were 2 angel costumes. They were absolutely perfect. The girls got dressed and went down to the ballroom. The decorations were white and gold. Marble statues were wearing masks and placed around the walls. The cake stood on the table in the middle. It's beautiful, Kirsty said. I don't think any of these masks are Flora's magic one, said Rachel. We must find it before the goblins do. Otherwise, the party will be ruined. Look up there, Kirsty cried. She pointed at the figure on the top of the cake. It's Flora. The figure winked, but they didn't have time to say hello. Some rather odd guests had arrived. Goblins, Rachel gasped. We're here for Jack Frost's party, snapped one of the smartly dressed guests. He was holding up an invitation. It's taking place here tonight. The girls glanced nervously at the invitation. It had clearly read, McCursy's Castle. Tell him to take it again, Flora whispered to Kirsty. She waved her wand at the invitation. The goblin reread the fancy invitation with his eyes almost popped out of his head. It says the party is at Jack Frost's castle, he muttered. The goblins all turned around and left, miserably. It was just in time. Lindsay's real guests were arriving for a party. Grrr! A growling sound suddenly made the girls look around. They saw a woman dressed as a tiger spring forward. She began sharpening her claws in the pillar. She's taking the dressing up a bit too seriously, Rachel whispered to Kirsty. People's costumes are going wrong because my mask is missing, said Flora sadly. Your fairy lockets were protecting you, but not the other guests. That woman thinks she's actually a tiger. Suddenly, Lindsay rushed in. She looked upset. She was still wearing ordinary dress clothes. I went to put on my costume, but I can't find my mask, Lindsay said. We have to find the magic mask quickly, whispered Rachel. Let's go and search. The goblins tiptoed away from the party and began looking. The girls tiptoed away from the party and began looking around the castle. The girls walked up and down the corridors, but they found nothing. Then Kirsty spotted something pink at the bottom of the staircase. Look, goblin footprints. And a tiny feather, she said. It's from my magic mask, whispered Flora. The footprints seemed to stop dead in the front of the wall. Do you think there's a secret passage? Rachel asked. The girls peered at the wall until Kirsty spotted a hole. Kirsty put her hand into the hole and it felt a little switch. When she pressed it, a wall swung back. The three friends stared to the dark passageway. Rachel and Flora followed. Kirsty down the narrow corridor, but they just found a dead end. "This is no good," said Kirsty. "Let me check this wall," Rachel replied. She felt stones and found another hole with a little switch inside it. Rachel pressed the switch and the wall moved a few centimeters as if it was a door. The girls peered into a cave-like room. They could see a familiar figure sitting on the throne. He had a magic mask on his hand. "Jack Frost," Kirsty said. We are going to ruin this pesky party." Jack Frost said. He laughed nastily. Kirsty opened the door a bit wider and saw lots of goblins listening to Jack Frost. "I'll run in and grab the mask," Kirsty said, trying to feel brave. She crept into the room. Jack Frost was shouting and waving at the mask about it. Kirsty was able to snatch it easily. "Stop that girl!" Jack Frost roared, but Rachel had pulled the door closed behind Kirsty. He was too late. The girls and Flora ran away from the passage. A few moments later, they were back at the party. "I can see Lindsay and Robert," Kirsty said. She pointed to a couple who were wearing fantastic king and queen costumes. "Lindsay," Kirsty called, "we found your mask. How dare you talk me in such a rude manner?" Lindsay snapped. The girls stared at each other in confusion. "It's okay," Flora whispered. "She thinks she's a real queen. Try giving her my magic mask. It will help." "Your Majesty," said Rachel, "we have brought you this tree boat." She held out the mask. Lindsay took it and held it up in her face. She blinked. Then she seemed to wake up as though she'd been in a dream. Lindsay was back into normal as soon as the party was in full swing. The three of Flora's magic items had been found, so everything was sure to go well. "Look over here," said Kirsty. She pointed to someone dressed as a pirate. He had a spiky beard. With him were other guests with green faces. "With amazing face paint," the woman in the tiger costume said to them. "Even Jack Frost and his goblins were joining the fancy dress party." Kirsty laughed. "Thank you so much for your help, girls," Flora said. "I'm going to stay for the party and make sure it goes perfectly." And it did.